Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Dad Life Podcast. Very excited to be with you today. We've got my man Stu on the
Hello.
mic, ready to roll. And we've got a wonderful guest with us today, Ivan Lee, who both Stu and I know. And very excited to talk to you about
Hmm.
kind of just being a dad and what that looks like. Now, here on the show, we often drink beer or whiskey, depending on the day you're listening to us or the week. But today we are going to preach responsible consumption. And my man Ivan is all about responsible consumption. So, Ivan, what did you bring for us to drink today?
Well, not necessarily about just responsible consumption, but I love carbonation, and so I picked and no sugar. So I picked a bubbly or buble, depending on
Bubbly.
what you want to call it.
Depending
My
on the
favorite
commercial.
flavor is the lemon lime version. Yeah. So
Oh, the
yes.
lemon lime.
Yeah, lemon lime.
So it's like a Sprite or a 7-Up without the sugar.
That's exactly it.
I got my wife just to pick out whichever one she wanted, and so I've got the strawberry buble today. So
I have the grapefruit, one of my favorites. The grapefruit.
Oh, yes.
I'm
Good one.
a big fan of bubbly because
listen to
it's
that.
the same thing because of the no sugar.
Listen to that carbonation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's just guilt-free carbonation is what I love.
Mm-hmm. Cheers, all.
Cheers. Now I will say this. Maybe it's because I'm getting older. But I was drinking a lot of this, through COVID. So I'm trying to bring down my alcohol consumption. So I was drinking a lot of soda drinks, and I just could not sleep. Like I was up every hour to pee like an old man. And maybe it's because I am becoming, I'm over 40 now. I'm 40. And so I cut out the carbonated beverages, and we're not talking like I was drinking them at 10 o'clock at night. We're talking like I would have my last one at 7, and then I go to bed, and then I would pee 8 times in a night. I was exhausted. Sounds and it's not my prostate because being 40, I had my prostate checked last year, so we're all good on that front.
Right?
So it was carbonated beverages. So if I drink these after dinner, I just pee all night, and there was no alcohol in it. There's no vodka. So yeah, I had to tone down the carbonated drinks. Usually I got to tone down the alcohol, but I got to tone down the carbonated drinks so I don't pee myself at night. Wow, they're pretty refreshing though. So what is it about what is it about the carbonated beverages that you like over beer or alcoholic drinks in general?
Well, I mean, the reality is the only reason I don't drink beer is because I don't like bitter. So I never acquired the taste. All my friends love it, so they make fun of me when I'm with them. But no, that's the only reason why. So I get that there's other there's beer guts and stuff like that go along with beer, but that's not the reason. It strictly is because I just don't like bitter, so I never picked it up.
Cool.
So I picked up drinking Coke, which is my favorite drink, but being over 40 with your metabolism taking a dive, the amount of sugar was just killing me. So
yeah.
But I also realized the carbonation that I find comforting. So when you get a solution like bubbly, which is guilt-free carbonation, everybody wins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's something about that carbonated water because I was trying to drink more water, and so I'd add a little bit of lemon, and it was fine, but it was, inevitably you end up drinking something else or pop or whatever. But yeah, I don't mean to talk about products here, but I got a SodaStream a couple of years ago. And so having that carbonation has been good. And actually the bubbly I'm drinking today is their concentrate that they sell.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's been awesome. Yeah. So definitely one of these a day.
Yeah,
we're all about product placement here, Stu. So if SodaStream is listening and you want to,
there you go.
SodaStream is listening, bubbly, the two combined, we'll work with you. Well,
absolutely.
we'll promote your product.
refreshing drink. That's for sure.
Yes. Yeah. Hit your soda stream. And I got nothing. I can't make anything up like that. Yeah. So try and get a commercial in there for SodaStream, who hasn't paid us, or Buble has not paid us, but we are enjoying their beverages nonetheless. More to the point of the topic of the show, Ivan, can you tell us a little bit about your family dynamic?
Yeah. I've got 3 kids. So oldest one is 14 and another one that's 12. Youngest is 9. So 2 girls and a boy. They are all very different, different personalities, different interests. The two girls couldn't be any more different. They're very opposite. You probably in a lot of ways can't even tell they're sisters. They look so different. And the boy is very much a typical boy, but also very. He has his mother's engaging personality, so he loves to chat, loves to engage. So yeah, it's definitely I would say a very fun atmosphere. Surprisingly, they get along very well. There's not a whole lot of fighting. They sort of purposely annoy each other a little bit here and there, but it hasn't
like good siblings
too much. Yeah, siblings, like sibling things, right? But other than that, no, that seems to be pretty overall pretty chill.
Very good. What's it like having a 14-year-old daughter and as the oldest, and as well being so different than her younger sister?
It's a great question because I was just asking myself: is it harder to deal with a teenager or a young kind of baby, because they're obviously very different and the challenges are very different. I have to admit, so far, at least in my experience, it's actually been much easier than I thought it'd be with a teenager. Now, obviously, there's the usual teenager attitude, that kind of thing, right? But overall, it's definitely less of a hairy experience than I thought it'd be with a teenage daughter. So so far, anyways, I mean, she's 14. There's still obviously a ways to go, but so far, no, it's been a lot easier than I thought. So, but maybe I thought it was going to be horrible. I don't know. Might just be the expectation thing.
Yeah. What's been the biggest challenge as a dad with a teenage daughter for you?
Yeah, it's one of those things where trying to find that balance between giving them guidance and giving them space to kind of make their own decision. Because at 14, you're hoping that you've given them a good enough foundation where they can make their own decisions and make mistakes here and there. But what I always tell them, and I kind of hammer this into all my kids, is look, go make mistakes. We've given you a foundation, make mistakes. Just don't make any life altering mistakes. That's kind of the thing, right? Because life altering, like, what's a life altering mistake? Definition of that would be going to jail, getting pregnant, like anything that will alter the course of your life, like permanently. So don't do those things. And then you got to go kind of form your own, your kind of carve your own path. But it's finding that balance of like, how much do you kind of let them go at 14 versus like kind of pulling them back. And it's a bit of a fine line you have to tread, because they have to be able to kind of start walking on their own a little bit. And so you try to figure out kind of where to err. So it's a bit of a balancing act. And when you see them kind of like not doing well, like how do you manage that? Sometimes you have to let them do it by themselves. Sometimes they'll come to you and just trying to make a decision on how to handle those. And you don't always get the decision right, but it's really just that balancing act, I think.
Yeah. So really, how do you do that, where you balance kind of allowing them to have that freedom and to, I assume they have to make some mistakes, in order to learn from that, but also then kind of correcting when you see behavior that is going to be destructive or is going to be potentially problematic for them going forward. Like, how do you kind of balance both of those, hold those two in tension?
Well, I have a little bit of a cheat in that, my wife has worked with youth for quite a while. So she's very good at connecting with youth. So that's sort of the ace in the hole for me. Like, she can handle kind of those bigger things. But even as a father, as the dad, kind of like, where do you, because I believe the role of the dad is to, a child's sense of identity, I think a lot of that does come from the dad.
For
So,
sure.
trying to figure that balance out. Every you have to treat every kid kind of a little bit differently, and you look at sort of um, um, each of the different personalities and kind of how you would kind of gauge it. So all I've really done is sort of I've erred on the side of sort of letting them fall a bit harder than to really kind of yank them back, because I feel like, fortunately, I think we're not in the position, we're not in a place where they really can go off the deep end very easily. So for the most part, I think it's been okay. It's a fairly safe environment for them to kind of make their mistakes. But there's also enough boundaries, I feel like, and they seem to be comfortable with the boundaries. And so far, haven't caught them trying to break the boundaries, but to the point where we can, they're allowing us to jump in when we need to. But so, for example, all of their social media, all of their like accounts, everything are accessible to us, and they are fully aware that if they're to have it at this age, then we need to be able to audit that once in a while. But we do reassure them we don't like just watch them like all the time, right? So it's just having that kind of safety there, and so I think we've come to a pretty good agreement in terms of like giving them enough freedom, but knowing that we will jump in if we see something like terribly wrong. But so I think erring on the side of giving them a little more rope is kind of the strategy we've taken, and so far it's been okay. But I think it depends on the kids.
I think you're muted, Justin.
I had a cough,
to read his lips.
Yeah. I had a cough, so I muted myself. And I thought I unmuted myself, but I didn't. So I guess with social media kind of being some sort of, it's a firestorm, or can be. How do you educate your daughters on, and I guess even your son too, how do you educate on healthy management of social media, especially at their age when, you look at that generation and they're driven through, the world is kind of driven through social media. So how do you manage that with a preteen, a teenager, and, an up and coming adolescent?
That is the $1 million questions. I mean, like we didn't grow up with social media, and I think for the most part, we're still kind of learning the ins and outs of it. So, what I tell the kids right now as just sort of a guiding principle, I tell them two things. The first thing is, here's sort of the general thing with social media, in my opinion, is social media is very much like makeup. Just the right amount can make you look pretty good. Too much of it, and you look like a clown. So it's kind of this like balance, but also they're very open to sort of discussing. So having the lines of communication open is important. I think this is where my wife excels, where she's very good at sort of getting the kids feeling comfortable to talk. So we can actually talk fairly openly about social media, the goods and the bad. And so we don't restrict a lot of their social media, but we do, obviously check out what they look at. And then if something comes up that I don't particularly like, I'll kind of say, hey, here's an example of something I don't like, and here's why. But we'll just talk about it. I don't stop them from looking at it, but so I'll just say, I would say be careful about this, but like, this is something that I'm not a big fan of. Haven't come across anything that is like really, really bad, but but I think having that dialogue is important, because really at the end of the day, we don't have social media figured out either. So we're kind of doing the best we can to kind of navigate it as well. And
yeah,
I don't know if we're ever going to kind of get that down, because it's a bit of an uncontrollable beast, I would say.
Yeah, it's kind of gotten out of hand in the last 5 years, and I think what it was originally intended for is it's no longer, it's originally kind of intended to kind of connect with people and share videos and or pictures or whatever. And now it's used for every form of communication and all kinds of information. It's the main medium for information sharing, right? So definitely concerned about that. I think as a father with a young boy, well, 2 young children, really, I'm definitely concerned about like what that's going to look like in another 10 years, right? Like 10 years ago, social media was totally different, and how we used it was different. And now you look and it's, I have no grasp of really how to use. I'm an old man, apparently. I have no grasp of. Somebody teach me how to use social media, please. So I think those are legitimate things. I think it's great that you handle it that way. Yeah.
Well, it's just going to get bigger because even now companies have roles dedicated just to managing social media, and that's just going to get bigger, I think, right? So we're going to have to learn to deal with it. That's kind of the reality. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A lot of, and Justin, you touched on it, a lot of social media now is kind of the main platform for information sharing, including bad information or false information. So how do you kind of help your kids become critical thinkers as to what they're seeing on social media, and rather than immediately, go off with whatever that tangent might be, but to actually think about it and to ask those questions? Because I mean, it sounds like you do engage in conversations on if there's something you see that is not, that you don't like on the social media. So how do you kind of help them? Because we can't just impart critical thinking. It's not a genetic trait. It's not something that, you have blue eyes because your dad has blue eyes type of thing.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? In 30 words or less. I'm just kidding.
Part of it is, I would say part of it is you have to have a feel for kind of where you think your kid is at and having faith that they are going to be able to handle it. Because honestly, if I felt like they couldn't handle it, I would just block the social media access. Now, the reality is, I'm a bit more technical, so I know how to do that like within my own home. But obviously can't do that outside of my home, but at least there's some area of control. But I feel like it's almost better to expose them a little bit to some stuff that's not great and have them understand why it's not great.
Right.
As opposed to block everything. So then the natural tendency is to, I want to see what this is, even though I'm not supposed to. So you have to have a little bit of faith and kind of let them go a bit with just enough rope where you can kind of pull them back. It's kind of the best we can do. Otherwise, the kids are just going to rebel, I think. So it's that kind of bounce. But it's very, I think they're very clear on it. If we need to, we have to cut it. And I think they're very clear about that boundary. So we just have to have faith that they kind of are adhering to it. And so far it seems to be working, but we'll see what it is with the youngest one. Cause he's still, he's more the rule breaker. So we'll kind of see what he does.
Yeah. Cause I mean, that's the thing is we have some measure of control in our own homes.
Yeah.
But they spend a lot of time outside our four walls. And so, peers are extremely influential on our kids, right? So,
absolutely.
I guess being able to, for them to see it in a safe way with you or your wife, and be able to kind of talk through that and what it is that they see and their interpretation, and then ask those questions and get something from you, as opposed to, here's this cool thing that dad won't let me look at that I'm looking at with my friend out on the playground. Cause every kid has a cell phone now. Again, not like we were growing up. I think our family got a cell phone when I was in grade 11.
Same here.
And we could talk after 9 p.m. But of course we weren't allowed to use the phone after 9 p.m. anyway. So it wasn't really much of an advantage.
We lived in the sticks, so there was no cell coverage. I didn't get a cell phone until I was in my 20s. I got my first one. I was never understood. They didn't work really all that well in the early 2000s anyway. So I had a landline, but gosh, man, I think it's so funny when I go into a home and I see a landline and people are still using a landline. I'm like, how does that even work anymore? Like, who supports a landline? Like, what phone companies out there? But I think you guys, you spoke really well on kind of the struggles and the challenges that we have as parents trying to set up that that really, I guess that safety where that safety zone where they're getting a little bit of maybe something that could be dangerous, but enough that they're it's satisfying and it's educational and we can use it to teach. That being said, Ivan, what's been kind of the biggest struggle you've had as a parent with two daughters and a son, and I know your wife, so you guys are two totally different people. So what's it kind of been like for you? What some challenges have you had being a dad over the last 14 years?
Well, I mean, for the first thing is like, I mean, we all know that being a parent doesn't come with instruction. So obviously, trying to figure that out with your spouse and kind of how to deal with it. But I think I would say for sure, like as the kids are a bit older, it's been more of a challenge because this is where again the balance of giving them more free, like how much freedom do you give them? Um, I think that what works well, what's worked well for us is that I think because my wife and I have very different strengths, as you mentioned, Justin, we're very different and we have very different strengths. Where that's worked is those strengths tend to complement each other. So in areas where maybe it's more emotional need or talking about like emotional things, that's where, and it's not that I haven't had any of those discussions with them, but my wife's very good at supporting the kids kind of from that area. All three of them actually, because they all seem very open and willing to talk. I have to admit, I'm not as good at the discussing emotional things. So generally, what happens is there's some sort of whether it's issue with friends or just whatever issues that teenagers have. Like my wife will talk to them about it, and when the kids are more at a place where they're looking for an actual solution, that's typically where I kind of come in a bit more. Because I'm more the problem solvers. Here's how we can tackle this versus discussing discussing the feelings part, which is probably the most important part that needs to be encouraged, and that's taken a while because you have to build that kind of relationship with them. But again, that's where I can kind of cheat because my wife is so good at that. She's been able to kind of create that environment for the kids where they can. So I've seen them actually get into very difficult discussions with her that I could only hope that the kids would be comfortable having with us, right? So again, it's been an advantage from that point. But the challenge, but it's just been you just don't know what you're going to encounter, and a lot of the time you're just trying to deal with things kind of on the fly and making decisions on how to handle things, and that's the toughest part, just not knowing the right way to do it, and you have to just sort of do it to the best of your abilities.
Now, you and your wife, as you said, have different strengths, and that kind of complements each other. Are there times though where those different strengths kind of conflict, and where you find kind of a disagreement, maybe with the direction of how the kids are being raised or certain freedoms or stuff like that?
Yes, very much so. So as I mentioned, she's very much the how are they doing emotionally, kind of how they're feeling. I come across as emotionless, but it's not really true. But like I'm very much more logical.
I am not a rock.
My position has always been very like make decisions without emotion. So it's very much
right.
Like, stop doing this, do this.
Right.
And this is where we've conflicted because she's like, well, we can't do that because this is the place they're at. I'm like, but we're just taking them down the wrong path. They don't need to do it. Let's just cut it up. Like, so that's where the conflict comes. But I think because we work well together, we generally find that balance. Because so, the kids know they're supported, but there's also that kind of, for lack of a better term, protection or boundary that is there. And plus the support of like, we're always going to try and protect them, right? But at the same time, it's like, we're not going to bail you out of a mistake that you make. If you make a mistake, you got to pay for it. So it's that, but I think it's worked well because I've learned a lot from with my wife and kind of her perspective of it. But she also, I think she's learned a lot from me in terms of it can't just be always about feelings. We need to actually, sometimes you just have to suck it up, pick up and go, right? Sometimes depending on the situation. And, that's kind of how we balance it.
I think that's a really good balance to have. And I think you made a really good point is communicating with our spouses to make sure that we're on the same page. And if we're not on the same page, is you just kind of working it out till we can, find that middle ground of where we're both happy, where we can both meet so that we're united as, you're united as a family. And the kids know that you've got each other's backs. That's really important for kids. So it really gives a lot of security. So I think that's great that you guys are already doing that. With because you have 3 kids, you guys have a busy lifestyle. Every time I chat with you, I feel like you're always on the cusp of going to a meeting somewhere. Like you're a very busy man. how do you how do you find the time to connect with 3 children individually? Like how are you
Yep.
investing in your kids as their father on a regular basis? Like what is there any special things you guys do? Is there stuff you plan together? Like how do you connect with your kids?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question because I feel like there's also I hear the word balanced a lot for me, but there's also a balance with this as well because I feel like you need to connect with your kids, super
Mm-hmm.
important, right? But there also has to be time to connect with your your spouse and to have your
Absolutely.
own thing as well.
Yeah.
So to me, it was important for the kids to know like we always want to connect with you, we always want to have time with you, but you need to have time for yourself as well. So we're not going to be like doing things together all the time, right? That's
Yeah.
so for me personally, I think it's important, and I think if I'm going to stand here or sit here, I guess in this case, sit here and say, my family is the most important thing to me in the world, which would mean that like work and everything else after that is second, third, or fourth, or whatever. Right? Now, obviously, work is important, so I have to make a decision on like, okay, well, am I going to go pursue my own career dreams and stuff and sacrifice my family? Or am I going to consciously, put a ceiling on myself from a work perspective, knowing very much that if I go beyond that ceiling, you know, you have to sacrifice more and more.
Right.
So I made the decision because, like, from my perspective, being a parent means that my job no longer is pursuing my own dreams. Now, this is a separate. I'm not suggesting no one should pursue their dreams. From my perspective, once you have kids, your dreams have to take a back seat. This is just my opinion, and
Yeah.
so I've consciously like, well, I'm not going to pursue like an executive type position because I know what that means. I know that means I'm not going to be around. I'm not going to get a chance to connect with them as much as I'd like to. So I consciously pick a place where I want to get to that I'm happy with that allows me the flexibility to be able to connect with them. That I'm home more than I'm not, and having that time to do that. So it's interesting because each of the kids have different interests and personal things. So how do we connect them if we're not um, you know we don't have the same interest necessarily, right? So, but it's about finding things, and sometimes I have to do things that I don't particularly enjoy, but you just do that. You have to do that to connect. So generally, what it is in the evenings and the weekends, there's always 2 or 3 things that we'll do together. Um, they do enjoy very much the family time that we have, but we also make it very important that we don't have family time all the time because
Right.
they'll be like, oh my gosh, kind of sick of you guys.
Yeah.
But no, like for example, like kids are older now, so we'll go do like last week we went to do an escape room, for example, right?
Oh, very cool.
Because they're old enough and they're able to do that. Youngest one didn't dig it so much, so we have to find things to do with him as well. But like going bike riding as a family one afternoon, making sure we have time to go on vacation, making sure we're part of all their activities. So any activities they're involved in. So if they're in track, we go to their track meets. I think all those things are connecting. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be sitting there and doing activity. I think they just need to feel supported and part of you're part of their lives. So
Yeah.
So it's a matter of making time for it and making sure that it's there to have it. And they're going to get to a point where they're so busy that there's going to be less and less time for families. So it's important to do it younger. So I think if I'm going to pursue anything more, it's going to be where they're at that stage where they have less time for me and everything's great, and I can, if I choose to, kind of pursue something else. But you consciously have to make sacrifices for it, and I think people maybe don't realize what that really means sometimes. So
yeah, I like what you said there. Like it's not like you got to stop dreaming or stop pursuing dreams, but I think our dreams that we want need to like incorporate our family. So if you have a dream that you want to pursue and you have a family and they're not, your family can't come with you along for that ride, then it might not be the best dream for right now.
Yeah.
But there's lots of ways to be, to be creative or to be to pursue a dream or a goal that you have that doesn't actually incorporate your family or doesn't infringe on your time with your family. So but you're right. And when you have kids, when you have a family, when you make that conscious decision to have those things, there are sacrifices. And I think for me, one of the biggest sacrifices have just been giving up my time and my leisurely activities that I like to do by myself. Just have a newborn and I get no time for myself. I feel like the earlier I try and get up, my son just follows me on that same clock. And so it's like trying to drink a cup of coffee in the morning is very difficult to do by myself and just kind of have a time to clear my head or clear my thoughts. And in the nighttime, we're so busy that, 9:00 rolls around, we're all exhausted and ready for bed. So it just, it's understanding that for now, those dreams just need to be, it's not that you can't pursue them, but just for now, your family has to come before a few of those goals.
Yeah. It's like a reorientation of the dream. Cause, Ivan, I think you said that where right now it's important to spend that time with your kids and be available and be there. But then there will come a time where they're going to be busy, where they're going to be doing their own thing. And that's when you can kind of transition back to some of the dreams and thoughts and goals that you may have. Cause it's one of these things where like I've always heard people say, you can't start parenting a child when they're 14. Like you have to be there, you have to build those foundations and maintain those foundations, maintain that relationship throughout. And then that's when, you benefit from that good relationship later on when they become adults and they start having families of their own and they want to be in contact with you and they want to connect with you and seek your advice on raising kids and that kind of thing, or family life, career life, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's no good if you're at work all day making money for a family that doesn't know you. So I think that balance, as you said, today's the Dad Podcast is brought to you by Balance today.
Balance, the word balance.
Balance.
Balance. You talking a little bit about like the sacrifice that we make as dads, or that we it's a good idea to choose to make those sacrifices, especially if we're going to have the families. Do you find a correlation or between how you parent and how your dad parented you? Like, do you find that there's like what I guess the question I'm asking is like how has your dad influenced how you're being a dad today?
Yeah, it's a great question. Given that, my dad's story is very different than mine because he came to Canada. He was immigrated to Canada, had I think at the time like $50 in his pocket, and just had to figure out how to make life work. So his journey was very, very different, and I would say much more difficult than mine. In that he had to figure out like to get something established before he could even think about like kids. And when I look back to kind of what he went through and what he accomplished, I think it's pretty amazing, given that, I think a lot of our parents have maybe similar stories where they've come, from different places or didn't have, very much, but they made something. And because of that, that's given us the opportunity to kind of take the next step forward. Growing up, I remember thinking to myself, like, my dad's never there. He's never like, not supportive or any of those sorts of things. But as I got older, I realized like in that case, he didn't have a choice, in that his perspective was provide everything he can to give me every opportunity to grow and to have a chance at a good career and to have fun. But because he also realized that requires resources. He worked for the first probably 13, 14 years of my life, worked probably 7 days a week. When I was 8, I think it was, he actually opened his own business, and that was, that's why he was away for so long and so much. And so it was a very different perspective, because all the Asian background is, dad's always gone working. Their job is to provide resources and opportunity for the children, and that's it, kind of thing, right? But I also remember, like, it got to a point where I was a bit older, where he was very much wanting to connect and wanting to spend more time, but it was a very different kind of dynamic, because being a silly teenager, it's kind of like, well, you've never been around. I don't want to hang out with you. So it was different from that perspective. But as I got older, I realized, understanding why he went through what he did and how he did everything for us. Like, I think my relationship with my dad's probably the best it's ever been. And we do see each other regularly, and we get a chance to connect pretty frequently. And, what I did take away from that was I still, we need to give our children the best opportunity they can. I think it's about making sacrifices, right? Like he did. But what I also learned is that, if I'm able to, but we need, some of the things he didn't do, not by choice, but because he had to do. Also realizing that I do need to spend a bit more time with them, give them some more my kids more guidance, more than he gave to me, but not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. So even though we had very different styles, now that I'm older and I was able to reflect back, I feel like I learned, I would say, a lot of my parenting style from him and his mistakes. But I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. Now I look at it, because he was dealt a very difficult hand, and he overcame that quite a bit, and realizing, it was challenging for him and it was challenging for me, but realizing that now, I think has set his grandkids up for better success, and I think that's really kind of the key. So it's not about no parent's going to do it perfectly, but if we can reflect back and look at the good things and bad things, let's take that all and actually apply to what we have to do. And I feel like he's had a big influence on how we deal with our kids.
Yeah. I just thinking back to my dad, like, I think you have to be at a certain age. Either you have to be at a certain physical age, or you have to be have your own children to kind of reflect and go, oh, okay, now I get why my dad did this the way he did. And I agree. Like, I have the best relationship with my dad now than I ever have. Probably a couple of years ago was the first time we were able to spend any more like time together without getting into a fight. And looking back, I can see where my dad, like what my dad was trying to do. And even though sometimes he was parenting out of fear, because he couldn't express to me, hey, I've made this mistake, and if you continue, you potentially could make the same mistake. He just was like, no, don't do that. And like, try to pull me back. Right. Then, hearing his story and kind of remembering things, you're like, oh, okay, I understand now why he didn't want me to do those things. And it wasn't that he was trying to get a fight with me or control me. He just wanted me to have a better, he wanted to set me up for success and not go through the same trials that he went through. Right. So, yeah, very good point.
Yeah. And I also remember, like, he worked long hours to, give us a chance. And it really pressed upon me, like, how much he sacrificed. Cause when we got married, had my own job, moved away, that's when he decided to pursue the thing he wanted to do, all this time, but he never had a chance to, because he wanted to not take that risk and impact what we were doing. So he moved into property development in his 60s.
Wow.
Because that's what he wanted to do just for fun. He had an interest in doing that, and he partnered with some people and was able to get involved in projects like that because he loved doing it. And so I mean, that really impressed upon me. Like, I think as a father, that's your responsibility to, sometimes put those dreams on hold a little bit, but you can pursue them at a different time. Right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like you kind of see some of the traits that your dad had in his parenting, good and bad. You see that in yourself as well in your parenting. Now, have you, with your kids being the ages now, are you seeing some of those traits now transferring down to them?
If I look hard enough, I think so, because I feel like it's one of those things where I feel like my kids are very different than me. They're very, not in a bad way. The personalities are just very different. Like, we're wired very differently. But as they're developing, it's easier to see in the 14-year-old, I think, because when I talk to my 14-year-old, I realize now we're actually more similar than I thought we were. Not that we're talking more so. She has the same perspectives as I do. She has the same things that irk her, and so I'm realizing, oh, we actually have a very similar perspective. Yeah. But also, like, when she talks about, like, well, this is what I think, or this is how I approach it, it actually sounds very similar to how I would do it. So I think it's hard to see on the surface. Like, if you look at the surfacey things, for example, like, I was into sports all my life, and my youngest, Trevor, like, he much prefers video games to sports.
Right.
It's a kid thing, I guess, right? Yeah, but do I see a glimpse of hope that he's going to, get into sports? maybe, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I can only kind of direct him that way. Hopefully he picks it. My second daughter was like, I hate sports. You know, I love dance, hate sports. That's what I'm going to do. But
Right.
now she's getting more into sports. So, personality things, our interests. It's even like the way we think. Like it's really hard to kind of just, for me, anyways, just like to make it to be very clear. But like I feel like once you kind of engage, then you can kind of start seeing it. But it's hard actually at this age, I think.
And
kind of
and
see the similarities.
I'm sure those things too change too over time.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure there were times where one of your daughters was more like you or more like your wife, or just like, who is this? They're completely different from both of us.
Yeah.
And that kind of just changes as they grow. But yeah, it's really interesting to see that she has a similar perspective on things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see a lot of me and my son in only in like one area really. I see his temper, and he has a mean temper, and I had a mean temper. So um, I'm like, how does something like that get passed along genetically, right? Like I'm not the level of temper that I had when I was his age. I do not have. I'm not even close to now. I grew out of it, or whatever you want to call it. Got it under control a long time ago. But I'm like, how do some of these things pass along as genetics? Some of these crazy character traits, right? It's more than, I think sometimes it's more than just looks. And like you said, it's some of the stuff is just under the surface, and you got to dig a little deeper to find kind of where you're impacting. Now, because my son is a little bit more like me in that area, hopefully I'll be able to help him understand that, like, how his anger and how to redirect it positively, and maybe control it sooner than I did, so he's not putting fists through walls when he's a teenager like his dad. So I was wondering, Ivan, what is your favorite thing about being a dad? What do you love most about it?
Besides all the sleeping in and free time.
Yeah.
Well, I told them when they're older, they're gonna have to buy me stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think when I was thinking about becoming a dad, I honestly didn't know. Right? You just don't know. You just don't know, because like it's nothing prepares you for it, right? Yeah. So my favorite thing, I think. So the question was my favorite thing, right? My favorite thing.
Yeah, what do you love about being a dad? What do you those moments where you're like, oh, this is what being a dad is like. So what are those moments for you?
I think it hit me recently that it's like you just can't know. It's just impossible to know until you become a parent how amazing it is, how amazing just in general it is to have kids. Like I was always afraid of it, to be honest. Like, oh my gosh, like it's scary, it's this and that. But like, good, bad, ugly, like when they're there, and just being, I think just honestly, just being a dad is the most amazing thing. Like all of it, good, bad, ugly. I think that's what surprised me the most, because before I thought like the best things were like, oh, you have fun, or you do this, or the kids are cute, or whatever it is. But like, really, it's the whole experience. It's the whole experience of like everything. And all you can do is you kind of set them up, and then at some point, your influence is going to be less and less. You can't tell them not to do certain things at a certain age, and it's just when you see them, grow and kind of and like mature, like there's just nothing better. Like every single moment of being a dad has been amazing. Like the cute things when they were a kid, like maybe no one else finds them cute, but there's the best, like they just make you smile and happy no matter what.
Yeah.
And but it continues as they're older. Like, the triumphs, their failures, like everything, just being a part of it. Like there's not one specific thing. I feel like the whole experience is nothing that you could ever replicate anywhere else.
Yeah. That's
very
cool.
Like,
said.
I'm okay if I don't have kids. I remember before I was like, if we don't have kids, we don't have kids. I'm not a kid person. You guys know me for a while. Like, have you ever seen me play with someone else's kid? I'm just not wired like for kids,
Right.
but I tell you, like, when you have kids, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
It's the best thing in the world, and it's worth all the sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay, Ivan, if you don't play with other people's children. I think that's not a slight against you. My wife is the same way. You'll never see my wife go and grab another parent's child. I am that way though. I'll be like, "Hey, can I hold your baby?" And then I'll just walk away, like, "Oh, that's cool. I'll bring it back in a little bit." So I think those personalities are okay. It's okay to love your kids and only your kids. And not really feel like you have to go and spend time with other people's children. So I want to thank you for coming today. And before we close up, I got one more question.
Sure.
You talked a lot about balance today. You talked a lot about sacrifice and maybe some of those big goals pursuing later. That it's not like you got to give them up at later. For anybody listening that might be kind of coming into being a dad or just being a new dad and a little bit nervous, what advice would you give them to try and set them up for success?
I think I would say, and I think this has kind of been said before, but I don't think people really understand the impact of it. But I would say, don't do it alone. I think this is where having a community around you is more important than ever, because it's interesting. I remember, like, fortunately, when we were having kids, like, a lot of the people that we're close to were having kids as well. And I remember just, like, there's times where you feel like a failure, right? And you just like, well, every parent is doing this like great, and I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But then you hear, like, parents share about, oh, this happened. And it's like, hey, the exact same thing happened to me. Like, it happens to everyone. But so then you start realizing, like, okay, you're not alone, and people are experiencing the same things. And that's where, when you can support each other, like, because being a parent is like we said before, it's like there's no instructions, there's no single way to do it. It's all about trying to figure out the best way to do it as you go along. Like, having multiple people around that you can trust and are going through the same thing, I think is critical. I think it's because we're not all going to have the right answers, but if we do it collectively, I feel like that's what really sets up parents for success. Like, not isolating yourself, because everyone's going to struggle, right? And everyone is going to get to a point where they need help, and if they can get through that, they can help other families too, right? So I think just don't do it alone. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, I think that's hugely important, because it really normalizes some of the crazy things that happen when you first become a dad, and even like some of the thoughts you might have, and not enough sleep, and fears and anxiety that go on, that all kind of come with that new child. And totally talking it out with other dads, or even just mentioning it, and getting the nods of approval of, yeah, I went through the same thing, or yeah, that's something. Or even if they didn't go through it, they might know someone who did, or they might. So yeah, it really normalizing these type of conversations, as opposed to just trying to do it alone, and understanding that our community actually makes us stronger. It's not our independence that makes us stronger. If we want to go back to the Vikings and conquering of worlds and stuff like that, it wasn't an individual who did it. It was communities and it was because of the strength that they were able to do that. Now, I'm not saying that we should go around and invade communities or anything like that. That's not what I'm calling for.
I think
unless there's anyone.
I think our community should invade Vancouver. I think we need to.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe no. I'm not doing that. Unless anyone wants to, then meet me by the park at 7 p.m. No, but it is truly a strength to have a community of dads, and have a community of around you to help you out, and to help us all out. Because even I talk with new dads, and there's stuff that they bring up that I'm like, oh yeah, I remember going through that, and I remember this is what I did. And so it actually is good for me even to go to have those conversations. It's not a burden or anything like that. And so for any of the new dads that are out there, dads want to talk about it. We like to problem solve. We want to be there with you. Right. So I think that's really good that you bring up the strength in the community and not doing it alone.
Absolutely. And that's what this podcast is here for, is we want to, we're a bunch of dads that who are normal, who want the best for our families. And we're here to try and share those experiences together and create a bigger community of dads who are just striving to be better dads. And that's simple. Yeah.
Yep.
So thank you guys for coming out today. I appreciate it. Ivan, thank you for your time. Stu, as always, thank you. And
thank you,
listener,
sir.
thank you for joining us as well. And with that, we are done. Bye.
Right.
Adios.
Thanks for having me.
See ya.